Let's pray to get started today. Father, just pray that you'll bless our time together and give me the right things to say, and pray you'll give everybody safe travel as they come here to church today. In Jesus' name, amen. I mentioned that because we're having a little bit of a snowstorm here in Columbus. We have a whole inch, but it's that inch that causes ice, so just pray that everybody gets here safely. Well, today I'm going to talk about the epicenters. There are a number of lines of Bible prophecy, and we talk about these each week about how they're converging, and they're centered in several different areas. They're centered geopolitically, in the Middle East and elsewhere. They're also centered culturally and socially. So we're going to look at some of those things today and try to make sense of them. I have a ton of things to go through, and we have a special speaker, so I'm recording this earlier, and we'll try to get through as much of this as we can. Of course, I want to mention this Times Person of the Year is Donald Trump, and I say that because I did talk last week a little bit about an Economist cover that seemed to indicate where certain people in the world would like to take things. I didn't think that it was predictive, but they used a lot of occult symbols, and so I thought it was worth looking at. And the only reason I put up this 2016 the World in 2016 cover that The Economist came out with a year ago is because they didn't include Donald Trump at all. And it's interesting. Now, update on the election. He's going to be sworn in on January 20th. There's some electors that will defect. I just haven't heard of any indication that enough of them will defect to cause somebody else to be elected. Everybody's planning for a transition. So I think he's going to take office. They stopped the recount in Michigan. I think in Wisconsin, the recount had resulted in a net gain of less than a couple hundred votes for any of the parties. So he's going to be sworn in. So he's Times Person of the Year. It's been an interesting thing. He's making some good appointments. He's making some bad appointments. As I've cautioned everybody, is go into this with sort of low expectations, and then you won't be disappointed. This is an interesting map I saw on Drudge yesterday about the cold wave that's sweeping down over the United States, and it's going to be cold. And it's kind of interesting in light of some of the global warming advocates that we continue to have these extra cold waves. I don't talk much about the economy, but there are a few things that I think are indicators that whatever rally you see going on in the stock market right now is a little bit on the illusory side, in that it's not really real. It's an emotional bubble, but if you look at the housing starts, single-family home construction as a percentage of GDP, you see that this peaked in the early 2000s, between 2000 and 2007, and then it just dropped off, the end of the earth, really. Went from about 3.5% of GDP to under 1% in just a year, around 2008. It's come back a little bit, but you can see it's still historically very low. There are pockets where there is a construction going on. We happen to live in one of those areas. Another thing, as you see, is change in single-family home ownership starts since 1990. And you can see how that is historically way below average, even with the little bit of a recovery that we've had, or what we've appeared to have had since 2010. And then change in new and existing homes sold, again, it's below historical highs and it certainly isn't way above. The other thing that's concerning is that there's still a lot of home loans that are past due. This is bad debt troubles in Europe. Non-performing loans as a percentage of all outstanding loans at the end of June 2016. Look at Greece, is 47%. Their economy has not recovered. It's just not in the news. And Italy is at 16%. Even 4% in France is a pretty kind of an unacceptable bad debt ratio. Wall Street had an interesting article about what are we going to do? Are we going to grow in our economy? And what they were talking about, they had a series of articles this week talking about the innovation paradox. And it says this: there is a yawning chasm between what innovation promises for the economy and what it is delivering. And it says dwindling gains in science, technology, and medicine are a hidden damper on economic growth. We live in what some people have called a gadget economy. We used to have Walkmans. Well, we used to have 8-tracks. Then we had cassettes. Then we had Walkmans. Then we had iPods. Then everything went to the iPhone. And we've reached a point where things are not being that innovative anymore. As regard to Trump's appointments, there are some that I appreciate. He's tapped a climate change skeptic for the top environmental post at the EPA. And I think this guy will actually do a pretty good job. His name is Scott Pruitt. He's the current Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma. 2 Timothy chapter 3, says this, know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. In Romans chapter 1, we read another condition of people that will, I think, be in the end times. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. I want to take a look at some of the things that sort of back up these verses today. Judicial Watch has a blog, the Corruption Chronicles, and they have this very interesting thing. The title of their blog says, U.S. workplace English rules are discriminatory, but foreign language demands aren't. So what they're saying is that the EOC has put out new rules under the Obama administration, and it says if your employer requires you to speak, Japanese, Spanish, French as part of your job, they can make those demands, but they cannot demand that you speak English. That's discriminatory. And this shows what the insanity that runs rampant and some of the things that I think won't happen under the new administration. Requiring employees in the United States to speak a foreign language is not discriminatory, but forcing them to speak English violates federal law under a sweeping order issued by the Obama administration to crack down on national origin discrimination in the workplace. They also have in a footnote this: in another victory, a national retailer was forced to pay $2.5 million back to $2.5 million to black job candidates that had been screened with criminal background checks. The EEOC asserts background checks have a disparate impact on African Americans, and the administration has bullied companies into eliminating these criminal background checks. I'm sure you all saw this thing about the warehouse fire at the rave that took place in Oakland. I think there were 36 or 37 were killed. I'm not going to show you the pictures of what was going on. It was an artist's warehouse, but the man was into a lot of really evil stuff. And there were just some of these horrific pictures of the Hindu god Shiva, the god or goddess of destruction. And this is where these people were having this party. And I heard they were doing a fire dance, and 37 people have ended up dead. Now, one of the things that we talked about, I read you Romans chapter 1, and essentially Romans chapter 1 says, God morons the world. He makes people lose the ability to reason. And I want to show you an example of this. This was mentioned to me at dinner last night. A transgender star in a movie is now eligible for male and female Oscar categories. So this person, and I don't know whether this person was born male or female, I think the name is Kelly Randall or something, in a movie called Confessions of a Womanizer. So this person is eligible both for male supporting actor and female supporting actor. Now, I'm not sure. Now, I think the Academy should be ashamed for thinking about this in a binary way. We know that you're supposed to be non-binary, and this shows how, this is where reality shows the stupidity of the left. I don't know if this person gets the votes from both categories counted towards one, and then will this person be offended if he or she gets the opposite of what they really identify as? So let's say this person identifies as a female, but is selected as male best supporting actor. What are they going to do? This is insanity and anti-science. I was just out in California, in Costa Mesa at, I think it's called Gold Coast Community College. They're engaged in a very big debate right now. This is from their the Coast Report, the college, the community college newspaper, and what they're having the debate about is what a professor said in class, and you'll hear a little bit about that. Here's a news report from a local California television station about what's going on.
Orange County tonight, a political firestorm over Donald Trump's election.
A college professor went off on Trump during class. It was posted online, and now there are threats of legal action and even expulsion. CBS 2 Orange County reporter Stacy Butler is live in Costa Mesa for us tonight with more. Stacy.
Pat and Jeff, she called the Trump election an act of terrorism. Well, the young Republicans here at Orange Coast College posted it online. Now, union reps and lawyers are battling it out.
By the way, her class was on human sexuality. She was a psychology professor on human sexuality. So then she started, of course, talking about politics, because to the left, everything is politics.
Our nation is divided. We have been assaulted. It's an act of terrorism. One of the most frightening things for me and most people in my life is that the people committing the assault are among us.
That's Orange Coast College professor Olga Perez-Stable-Cox lashing out at Donald Trump in her human sexuality class. One student was so offended by the political speech, he recorded it with his cell phone.
White supremacist and a vice president that is one of the most anti-gay humans in this country.
At this point, it's not even education anymore, it's indoctrination.
Josh Ricaldi Martinez is a member of the Young Republicans Club at the school, which has filed a formal complaint. Another student complained on the website ratemyteacher.com. I felt censored and bullied if I did not agree with her opinions. Political opinions she shared in depth with the class.
We are way beyond Republicans and Democrats, and we're really back to being a civil war. And I don't mean it in a fighting way, but our nation is divided as clearly as it was in Civil War times.
Ricaldi Martinez posted the video on his Facebook page. He now has 18,000 views and hundreds of comments. Tonight, the professors' union posted a warning on his page. It condemned the student who recorded the video, saying, "This is an illegal recording without the permission of the instructor. The student will be identified and may be facing legal action."
But they wanted it to be known so that way maybe we would get scared and take down the video. But to the union, I want to say we're not going to be doing that.
The unions are acting like thugs, like bullies themselves.
Attorney Sean Steele, who is also the Republican National Committee man from California, volunteered to represent the Young Republicans. He says the student who shot the video is afraid he could be suspended or expelled with just 1 week left in the semester.
Every student knows that if you stand up to your professor, 90% of the time the professor is going to punish you.
Now, I spoke with the president of the college here earlier today. He couldn't go on camera, he says, because this is still under investigation. But he did tell me that the college encourages discourse about current events with students and faculty when they're in context. I also called the teacher as well as her union representative. I didn't hear back from either one. Back to you guys.
Okay. This is happening. This is on the front page of this morning's Columbus Dispatch. And just so you can see where this is going, Ohio colleges vow to protect immigrants. Ohio University President Roderick McDavis said this: undocumented students have accomplished great things during their time at Ohio University and will go on to even, when they leave, accomplish even greater things. And so what colleges like Oberlin and Ohio Wesleyan, just a few miles up the road, are doing is they're going to be sanctuary campuses. And it's interesting that the left, for years, have railed against conservatives who have talked about state rights. Certain things should be left to the states. Now that the Republicans control most of the major branches of government in D.C., the left is moving back to states' rights because they think that's where they can accomplish some things. So this is where all this is going, that we live in a state of lawlessness. There are laws out there about immigration. I saw an interview with the mayor of New York who said that New York would be a sanctuary city and we shouldn't essentially vet people or inquire where they came from. And I would suggest to somebody in New York, take the mayor down to Battery Park, get on the Ellis Island ferry, and go out there and tell this guy what's happened in American history in his own city and tell him to stop being an idiot. In Netherlands, Geert Wilders, who had raised the question, do we want more Moroccans, has now been convicted of hate speech. They're not going to fine him. They're not going to put him in prison. They're just trying to make an example of him to chill other people from talking about the obvious problems that they have with immigration from the Middle East and Africa in Europe. It's causing major problems. I saw a picture of a church in Sweden where immigrants are going in and engaging in self-gratification sexual acts in the pews. They're defecating, they're urinating in the pews, and the Swedish authorities say that it's Swedish men that are doing it. And it's not Swedish men, it's immigrants, and they have a major problem. They need to do this. We talk about sort of this coming one world government and one world religion, and I think you see the beginnings of it here. I think it'll come through sort of a leftism. And here was a meeting this week. Fortune and Time had a global forum at the Vatican in Rome. Working group solutions and what they talked about. Here's some of the things that they talked about. It was the 21st century challenge, forging a new social compact. And what they want to do, there were a lot of different speakers from major companies there that were talking about how we're going to use technocracy to develop this new social order. Here is what one person said, the CEO of Siemens: to beat climate change, digitalize the electrical world. Kaiser's the CEO of Siemens. Electrifying the world's infrastructure is the critical next step to decarbonization. We must consider tactics to speed progress towards this goal. Maybe we ought to start the decarbonization with this guy. I don't think that he would like that. An increased push for energy efficiency, renewable energy technology, said electric mobility, along with the growing digitalization movement and a universal carbon pricing structure, would speed up the carbon-free future and the rise of a global middle class we desperately need. We can and must all do our part. I would suggest that you go read Technocracy Rising by Patrick Wood. Check out his website on technocracy. You'll get a lot of information there. He continued, while the transition from a combustion-powered society to electrification is already underway due to market forces alone, this transition will take generations without support. But we have every incentive, environmental, economic, and yes, moral, to speed the evolution. We also have the means. So this is where it's going. Here's the picture of the CEOs there with the Pope. I believe this is the Sistine Chapel. I'm not sure though, but I think it is. And there are a bunch of media personalities there. I saw some people from Fox and CNN that were talking about being at this meeting. The Pope tweeted this: The church does not grow through proselytism, but by attraction. Now, it sounds like he's read one of the books on church growth. If he believes this, this is what Andy Stanley's philosophy is of ministry, that we have to attract people to the church by any means. One pastor wrote in response, Epic Preacher, "That's not what Jesus said. He said to go into all the world and preach the gospel. I wonder if the Pope actually reads the Bible." But to follow up on this just came out the other day too, after this meeting. New priests are to learn about global warming as part of their spiritual formation. So listen, this is where this is going. This is what people like Patrick Wood and others, the Agenda 21, technocracy, carbon credits, decarbonization, all of this stuff is connected. And now here you have the Pope in Rome hosting this global forum where they're talking about these things openly and publishing it. So you need to be aware of that. Now I want to prepare you for some very, very troubling things here that you'll see. First of all, in Scotland and France, pro-life groups are being censored. It's actually becoming against the law to advocate against abortion in those cultures, in those countries. Here's one headline that says, "We won't win even people on the left are pushing back, we won't win the pro-choice argument by banning pro-life groups," is what one person blogged. In National Review, there's a very good article, one by Daniel Payne, a couple of articles. France prepares to criminalize pro-life advocacy. And it says this: American pro-life activists should be grateful that we live in a country whose laws vigorously protect our right of freedom of speech, and that there are plenty of other nations that are descending into censorship. This article says, telling the truth about abortion is often a fraught affair and sometimes dangerous. And now in France, it's against the law. The law in France now is any website carrying material that is deemed to be deliberately misleading, intimidating, and or exerting psychological or moral pressure aimed at persuading a mother not to abort her child could face criminal charges with punishments of 2 years in prison and a fine of 30,000 euros, over $30,000. That's where it's going. George Will, and I have problems with some of the recent things of George Will, but George Will has a great article on National Review, "The Sensitivity Police Strike Again." Listen to what he says. Now, George is talking about Down syndrome children. The court has said, in effect, that the lives of Down syndrome people, a ruling in France, and by inescapable implication, the lives of many other disabled people, matter less than the serenity of people who have acted on one or more of three vicious principles: that the lives of the disabled are not worth living. That's one. Two, that the lives of the disabled are of negligible value next to the desire of the parents to have a child who has no special, meaning inconvenient needs. And you need to understand that George Will himself has a son with Down syndrome. I believe that son is now in his 30s or close to 30. And third, that the government should suppress the voices of Down syndrome children in order to guarantee other people's right not to be disturbed by reminders that they have made lethal choices on the basis of one or both of the first two inappropriate principles. Now, I want to prepare you. I want you to pretend that you are a French man or French woman. And I want to prepare you in advance for the horrible, horrific things that you're going to see in this next video. France has banned this video from the internet and television because of the horrors that it shows. So please be careful. The video is called Dear Mother. Please be careful. You might want to grab a fainting towel or a glass of water as you watch this. Watch this horrific video that you can't see in France. On the 9th of February, we received this email from a mother. I'm expecting a baby. I've discovered he has Down syndrome. I'm scared. What kind of life will my child have? And here are the answers.
futura mamma.
Your future mom.
Don't be afraid.
Tu niño podrá hacer muchas cosas.
Podrá abrazarte. Podrá correr hacia ti.
Il pourra parler et te dire qu'il t'aime. Il pourra aller à l'école. Como todos.
Il est schreiben.
Il pourra t'écrire si un jour elle est loin.
Because indeed, he'll be able to travel too.
Il pourra aider son père à réparer son vélo.
Podrá laborar y ganar su dinero.
Avec son salaire, il pourra t'inviter à dîner.
O affittare un appartamento e andare a vivere da solo. A volte sarà difficile.
Jak ciężko. Quasi possible. N'est-ce pas pareil pour toutes les mères?
Dear future mom.
Tuo figlio potrà essere felice. Come lo sono io.
Et tu seras heureuse aussi.
Vero, mamma? Vero, mamma?
It's official. France has lost its soul. France, as a culture, is the epitome of Romans chapter 1. They have lost the ability to reason. They've lost the ability to love. They are, I think it's over. I think it's over for France. But don't take too much comfort in that, other countries, because we've been on this path for over 40 years, and this is where it ends. And it's incredible to me that video is too horrific to be shown on French television. It's stunning to me. There are many things going on in the world. We'll talk mostly about geopolitics now for the rest of the hour. In Seoul, Korea, there is what Commentary Magazine called a perfect storm going on, in that the South Korean leader, a conservative, is now been impeached. The vote took place the other day. She may be removed from office. I think Max Boot in his article on Commentary, I would say Max Boot is sort of a centrist politically, said that, well, there are other conservatives being considered to take over in the event that she is removed from office. And one of these conservatives is a man that you know as the former UN General Secretary, Ban Ki-moon. He's considered a conservative. And then there are liberal people that are also being considered. But listen, this has huge implications because of the government being sort of opposed to North Korea and holding them in check. She canceled, the current leader, I can't remember her name, canceled some contracts, a trade zone that they had set up in North Korea because North Korea was using that money to fund its nuclear program. And they now have a missile that they say is capable of reaching the United States. Now, whether it can survive re-entry yet, we don't know, but they're testing it constantly, and it's a problem. And there's concern is what's going to happen. So this is a flashpoint. This is a potential, this is an earthquake that's happening in Korea now, South Korea, with regard to its leadership, and the implications that it has for the free world. So this is just another, you can add this one to the list of the many places that are flashpoints that could lead or could trigger a future world war. Aleppo. This used to be the largest city in Syria. It has been pounded mercilessly by the Syrian regime, both before and after the Russians joined in. They've been using barrel bombs to destroy large parts of the city where people opposed to the Syrian government, whether they're affiliated with Al-Qaeda or the Free Syrian Army, have been located. The city has been effectively, at least the rebel-held areas, has been effectively destroyed. The citadel area of Aleppo has been destroyed and heavily damaged. And now there's been a push over the past week. The Syrian government, aided by the Russians, has taken back large chunks of the city, and now people are on the move again. Look at these apartment buildings, and you see this block after block after block in Aleppo of these people leaving. Here's a BBC report on Aleppo.
And its allies. Today the army has taken us here to Shar, the area they recaptured yesterday, and you can see what heavy fighting there's been here. You can still smell the explosives. By recapturing this area, they were able to move towards the ancient citadel, and in doing so they split the rebel forces and then quickly seized the historic old city of Aleppo. It's a huge victory by President Assad's forces, but the battle isn't over yet. The remaining rebel fighters have retreated to what's left of their rebel enclave, including the battle-hardened fighters of the group known as the Nusra Front, linked to Al-Qaeda. Some of the toughest battles in this war for Aleppo are about to begin, and so concern is mounting for the tens of thousands of civilians trapped there. Hundreds of families are already fleeing into government-controlled West Aleppo. The others are trying to make it to rebel areas which are not on the current front lines. There is a sense that the battle for this strategic city is about to end, and that would be the biggest victory for President Assad's forces since this uprising began nearly 6 years ago.
I mean, look at the massive destruction in this city. Here's a wide-angle shot. And people that are left, they're the ones that want to leave. They're saying we are dead either way. And they're saying if we leave, we're dead. If we stay, we're dead. And some of them are actually praying for death. This graphic shows a little bit about the green area there. Shows how the government is, the yellow area is still held by the opposition in the lower part. The Kurds hold the upper part. And you see where the government has taken back the eastern part of the city and moved into the old city in just the last few days. And the residents have said that, you know, as they've tried to leave, they've been told that if you leave, we're going to kill you. It's a major battle. It's disrupting the entire fabric of what used to be called Syria. It has huge implications for Israel. I'll talk about that in a moment. At the same time that that's going on, there is a battle for Mosul. And this battle for Mosul is bogging down. At the same time that the battle for Mosul is going on, ISIS is now on the verge of recapturing Palmyra from the Syrian Syrian army. So this stuff is going to go on for a long time. This could get very, very dicey. This is from the Wall Street Journal article the other day. It's a testimony or an article by a filmmaker who's been filming in Aleppo and Mosul. And he talks about what's going on and why it's so difficult in Mosul. And he says this: one example will suffice. It is November 27. We are at the edge of the officially secured zone in the neighborhoods of Al-Masarif and Al-Zohur. This is in Mosul, ancient Nineveh. A three-wheeled vehicle pulls up carrying 5 civilians wounded by a rocket while out hunting for water. We help move the most seriously hurt into the back of a Humvee. We question the brother of one. He is drunk with distress and vowing vengeance. The salvo was fired from very close, he says, no more than 100 meters, by a group that came out of nowhere and disappeared as fast. These commandos fish in the water of a city that they have riddled with tunnels. These human bombs that pop up at any moment like evil genies behind positions that have been thought secure are the terror of the civilian population. and of the military coalition as well. And so the fear is that now the Iraqi troops that are moving into Mosul, even the Kurds, will lose heart because they've dug tunnels all through the city. And as they come into one part of the city, these ISIS fighters, there's at least 4,000 of them, they believe, left in Mosul. They just pop up, run out as a suicide bomber, or just pop up and start shooting people and then disappear back into the tunnels. And so the whole area is riddled with booby traps and tunnels and mines. And it's a major humanitarian disaster. In Aleppo right now, they estimate there are 250,000 people at risk of starvation. The UN is trying to get in there. They're not being let in by the government, the Syrian government. In Mosul, there are maybe 1 million people at risk. People are trying to get away. They're trying to get corridors for them to leave. But because of these tunnels and everything, that's fraught with an incredible amount of risk. I've played this a couple times in the last week. I want to, this doesn't have, it has a little bit of sound at the end. This is an ISIS video, high definition, shot of drone footage, shot of suicide bomb attacks. You'll see these explosions that take place. You see the vehicle there in the middle, and then boom. And what they're doing is they're going into areas, this happens in Aleppo, but this is happening in the area of Mosul. You see these, and these are drones that ISIS is doing for their propaganda to show the devastating impact of these suicide bombers. And these guys go out in these trucks that are built like tanks. They cover the wheels with armor so they can go. And so what they do is they select a target and then they drive in. It's essentially a tank filled with explosive. It has a little bulletproof glass window so the guy can see where he's going. And they go to where they can do the most damage. And sometimes they go in teams of two vehicles, 2 suicide bombers. You'll see a couple more here. Here it is down here coming up through the center of the screen now. You see the ISIS flag they put on the video. And they get to where they want to do their deed, boom. That was a military target where people were, military soldiers were gathered. I think the next one goes into a rather large compound that's secure. Here you see the vehicle there sort of in the left center, driving toward the target, boom. Maybe the next one is the compound one. I think there are 2 more, boom. In this last one, I think you can even see bodies flying through the air when it goes off. So here comes the vehicle. They'll highlight in red the target. If you want to see more of these, there's a YouTube channel called War Explosions. See the courtyard there? And they want to get to where they can cause the most damage, and then they'll pull the trigger and explode the vehicle. I think there's one more. I say I think, I have no idea, really. There's the vehicle there coming up on the left. There's the red target. Boom. Okay, now this is a video. These are guys, they're going to go out. They've heard some disturbance in the street. These are either Iraqi or Kurdish troops. They've been in courtyard. They happen to be being filmed. And so they're going out to check what's going on in the street. They weren't okay. 5 of them were killed in that particular explosion. I raise this because what's going on in Syria with this battle for Aleppo and what used to be Syria, I think does have some prophetic implications. We know when we read the list of countries in Ezekiel 38 as to who is involved in this battle, this invasion from the north of Israel, and actually joined by countries in the coalition from Libya, Put, and Ethiopia or Sudan. We know that Syria is not really mentioned. And my good friend Jack Hibbs talked about this in an update he did on Wednesday night. You might look that up on the Real Life Jack Hibbs YouTube channel. He talked a little bit about this. I'm going to cover it a little bit too. But what we see here is Obama's leaving office in 40 days, roughly. There is a window that I don't know whether they'll act within that window. But Trump, I think, will change some things, but it's going to take, there's a transition time. And because of that transition in the United States and that government, I think that it's a time for people to be very careful and watchful as to what's going on over there, because that window of opportunity may close. And Iran knows that. So this was on the IDF Facebook page the other day to show you the problem, and I'll read some things from Caroline Glick as part of this. They had this declassified map of Hezbollah's military infrastructure in Lebanon. And this is a civilian village of 85 people, and the red are where people live, the little red dots. And then the other dots are weapons warehouse, rocket launcher, infantry position, anti-tank position, and command post. Now, this is along the Lebanon-Israeli border. Really, you see Syria there, you see Lebanon, you see Israel. And this is what Israel faces. And Jonathan Tobin has a great article in Commentary Magazine, Lessons of the Next Missile War. Israel went into Lebanon in 2006, and it didn't go well at the beginning because they had underestimated Hezbollah. Whatever they faced in 2006 is many, many times worse now. It's estimated that Hezbollah in southern Lebanon has 150,000 rockets to launch at Israel. They have tens of thousands of rocket launchers. Now, why would they have so many rocket launchers for only 150,000 missiles? The reason is they want to release as many missiles at one time because the Israeli missile defenses can only withstand a certain number of missiles, or take down a certain number of missiles. So they want to overwhelm the system. It's almost like a denial of service attack on the internet where they overwhelm a website with requests. So Caroline Glick has a great article, Israel's First Project with Trump. What do we need to do with Trump? This morning in the Jerusalem Post, they have a couple articles, Back to the Future, as Iran sets the agenda. It always comes back to Iran. And Hezbollah is now denying that it promised Russia that they would make no attacks on Israel if they helped Russia in the war in Syria. So listen to what Caroline Glick has to say. There was a conference a few weeks ago in Jerusalem, a diplomatic conference. I'm going to play a little bit of that for you here today. And Netanyahu spoke, Caroline Glick spoke, Netanyahu, Naftali Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, the defense minister, all spoke about what's going on with Israel. Last week there was Saban, the Saban Forum at the Brookings Institute. Saban is the guy that owns the Spanish language Mexican Univision, a very big Democratic supporter, contributor, and he hosted a forum on Israel and the U.S., which he does every year. I didn't have time to edit the videos down, and I'll spare you what John Kerry had to say. I'll mention it in a moment. So Caroline Glick reviews these conferences and she says this: Netanyahu may be better advised to first address the conventional threat Iran poses to Israel, the U.S., and the rest of the region in the aftermath of the nuclear deal. There are two reasons to start with Iran's conventional threat rather than its nuclear program. So we all worry about the nuclear program, but Caroline says we need to look at the conventional threat. And Trump needs to be aware of this. The second reason it makes sense for Israel to begin its strategic discussions with the Trump administration, by addressing Iran's growing regional posture is because Iran's hegemonic rise is a strategic threat to Israel. At present, Israel lacks a strategy for dealing with it. And Caroline is very bold and very honest about the fact that Israel has some problems and they need to deal with them. Now, there are some things going on in the background that give one a little bit of hope for that, but we're in a transition period, and this is a very volatile time. Our leaders today still describe Hezbollah with the same terms they used to describe Hezbollah's massive rocket arsenal, with 150,000 projectiles pointed at Israel. In a way, it makes sense that Israel does this. After extensive rearmament campaigns financed in part by Iran, both Hamas and Hezbollah may now be in possession of so many rockets that Israel's highly successful missile defense systems might be overwhelmed. Throw in the possibility that as a result of the Syrian civil war, Hezbollah may now be in possession of at least some of the Assad regime's chemical weapons arsenal. And the report paints a potentially fearful picture. And there are chemical weapons there. Some of those were manufactured by the Syrian government before the Syrian civil war started. Some have been taken over by ISIS. Some of these are the stockpile of Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction that were transferred over to the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon and into bunkers in the city of Damascus. And you need to remember that. That's very important. Israel's security rests on assumptions that may be proven false if, encouraged by an Iranian regime that has been enriched and emboldened by President Obama's attempt to appease them, Hezbollah and Hamas coordinate their next attacks and launch missiles in the kinds of numbers that might cause far more damage than the ineffectual campaign of 2014. If the West Bank were also held by a hostile Palestinian regime that refuses to accept Israel's legitimacy that had access to such weapons, that peril would be compounded. And I would suggest one thing. We know that Hamas is doing this in the Gaza Strip. Like ISIS in Mosul, I think ISIS in Mosul learned from Hamas in Gaza to dig tunnels. And these tunnels are a huge problem. And in Gaza, they're still building tunnels. And they're still trying to Israel goes in and destroys them every now and then. But look at that graphic there from the IDF, and just imagine that in addition to all these weapons warehouses and infantry positions and those sort of things, Hezbollah, who's controlled southern Lebanon for decades now, has dug tunnels there. And what happens if Israel has to go in and invade southern Lebanon? This is a very, very volatile situation, and I'm not sure how Israel deals with it. Caroline continues, just this week, Israel reinforced the sense that Hezbollah is more or less the same organization it was 10 years ago when, according to Syrian and Hezbollah reports, on Tuesday, Israel bombed Syrian military installations outside Damascus. Now, it's been very murky as to what happened, but there is a military base outside Damascus, and it was struck. There were explosions that occurred there. Now, whether that was Israeli planes bombing them or missiles being shot in by Israel, rockets being shot in to take out what was believed to be weapons of mass destruction that were being transferred to Hezbollah, we don't know. But what Caroline is saying is, look, we pretend, the Israeli government is pretending that Hezbollah is just in southern Lebanon, and it's not true. They're also in Syria. She continues, following the alleged bombing, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman told EU ambassadors that Israel is committed to preventing Hezbollah from transferring advanced weapons, including weapons of mass destruction from Syria to Lebanon. The underlying message is that having those weapons in Syria is not viewed as a direct threat to Israel, and it should be. Statements like Lieberman's also send the message that other than the prospect of weapons of mass destruction or precision missiles being stockpiled in Lebanon, Israel isn't particularly concerned about what is happening in Lebanon. These statements are unhelpful because they obfuscate the fact that Hezbollah is not the guerrilla organization it was a decade ago. Hezbollah has changed in 4 basic ways since the last war. First, Hezbollah is no longer coy about the fact that it is an Iranian rather than a Lebanese organization. What our enemy's new openness tells us is that Israel must cease discussing Hezbollah and Iran as separate entities. Israel's next war in Lebanon will not be with Hezbollah or even with Lebanon. It will be with Iran. The second way that Hezbollah is different today is that it is no longer a guerrilla force. It is a regular army with a guerrilla arm and a regional presence. Its arsenal is as deep as Iran's arsenal, and at present at least, it operates under the protection of the Russian Air Force and air defense systems. And then there was this picture that was taken in Syria. The U.S. State Department has been asked about this, and the answer that they've given is, well, we're looking into this. And what is this? These are M113 armored personnel carriers. There are also M1A Abrams tanks that you can see in other pictures that were taken. And this is a victory celebration of Hezbollah troops. You see the Hezbollah yellow flag there in Lebanon. Now, what's the big deal with M1 Abrams tanks and M113 armored personnel carriers? Well, those are vehicles that have been manufactured by the United States of America. And the question is, where is Hezbollah getting American-manufactured armored personnel carriers and tanks? And the question was, somebody hasn't been minding the store. They think they got them from Lebanon. Hezbollah has effectively taken over the Lebanese government, and this is a major problem. The significance of Hezbollah's vastly expanded capabilities is clear. Nasrallah's claims in recent years that in the next war his forces will stage a ground invasion of the Galilee and seek to seize Israeli border towns was not idle talk. Even worse, the open collaboration between Russia and Iran, Hezbollah, and Syria and their recent victories in Aleppo mean that there is no reason for Israel to assume that Hezbollah will only attack from Lebanon. There is a growing likelihood that Hezbollah will make its move from Syrian territory. The third major change from 2006 is that, like Iran, Hezbollah today is much richer than it was before Obama concluded the nuclear deal with the Ayatollahs last year. The deal, which canceled economic and trade sanctions on Iran, has given the mullahs a massive infusion of cash. The final insight that Israel needs to base its strategic planning on is that a month and a half ago, Hezbollah Iran swallowed Lebanon. In late October, after a 2.5-year fight, Saad Hariri and his future movement caved to Iran and Hezbollah and agreed to support their puppet, Michael Aoun, in his bid for the Lebanese presidency. He's about 80 years old. In our leaders' conversations with Trump's team, they must make clear that the Iranian conventional threat stretches from Afghanistan to Israel and on to Latin America and Michigan. This is a brilliant article. Whereas Israel will not fight Iran in Iraq and Afghanistan or in the Americas, it doesn't expect the U.S. to fight Iran and Lebanon. But at the same time, as both allies begin to roll back the Iranian threat, they should be operating from a joint strategic vision that secures the world from Iran's conventional threat. What you're seeing here is everything's lined up for an Ezekiel 38 war. We know that from Psalm 83, whether that's, some people say it's a war, some people say that it's not, at least it shows that there is this perpetual hatred of the surrounding countries for Israel. I don't know if I have a slide on it, but the head of the UN Human Rights Council now is a prince from Jordan. And he was criticizing the U.S. immigration policy. I have a picture, I don't know if it's in my slides, of the 5th largest cities in Jordan, where this prince is from. This 5th largest city is a refugee camp of Syrian immigrants. And he has the audacity to get on the world stage and criticize our immigration policy. I'm telling you, the world is out of control. But there is a little hope. This is the F-35, upper left-hand corner, and you see one here. That Two of those, they cost, I think, about $130 million each. The first two of, I think Israel has ordered 50 of these. We've agreed to sell them 50 of the F-35s. Now, there are problems with the F-35, but most aeronautical people say that the F-35, whoever gets it, will have air superiority in fighter-to-fighter combat for 40 years. It's a very advanced aircraft. It does things, it has a helmet that the pilot wears. Israel's making their own that cost about $400,000 each because of the electronics that are in them. I want that computer. There have been reports that in simulated air battles, that one F-35 going against 8 F-16s or 10 F-15s, which are fairly good fighters. They've been the staple of our armed Air Force for years. That one F-35 in an air battle with the F-16, 8 F-16s, took out all F-16s, took out all 8 of them. Against 10 F-15s, the F-35 took out all 10. Israel also has this, and go listen to Jack's thing. This is a Grumman manufactured in the United States and then enhanced with Israeli avionics and technology. This is essentially, it's not a very pretty plane. It's made by Grumman. I think it's manufactured in Georgia. And they have about 5 or 6 of these, Israel does. These planes can go up and they can completely blind everybody else's radar so that they don't know that Israel planes are in the air, their missiles are in the air, or they can simulate it looks like a bunch of planes are coming. In other words, they have some way of taking over the radar and missile warning systems of other countries. And this earlier version of this is probably what allowed the Israeli planes to fly up along the Med Coast across southern Turkey about 12 years ago and take out that North Korean-made nuclear reactor that was along the Euphrates River in Syria. That would be in, by the way, if it had not been taken out, it might be in ISIS's hands today. So here's what happened this week. You see the Sea of Galilee there next to, just to the left of Quneitra. You see Beirut, you see Damascus. To give you some idea of the distances, from the red dot in Damascus to the red dot in Beirut is about 52 miles. It's not that far. So when you're in Quneitra to downtown Damascus is 30 to 35 miles. There's a military base on the south side of Damascus that Israel attacked either with missiles or fighter aircraft and destroyed whatever was going on there. It's all been very hush-hush. But Israel's taking care of it. But that gives you sort of an idea of the proximity. And then if you just go to the sort of up the slide from Quneitra, you'll be along the Syrian, Lebanese, Israel border, not too far from the ancient city of Dan, where all of these Hezbollah installations are that I showed you in that village of 85 and all the rocket launchers. The problem is that Russia has developed a very sophisticated anti-aircraft system. But so what this delivery of the F-35s is doing is closing the window of opportunity. Now, it'll take a while. Israel gets them tomorrow, 2 of them, and it will take them a while to get them up and running and the training and all that, though they've been working on it for a year or 2. We have a bunch of F-35s, but they're not yet operational. They've been in place for about a year, but they've not been used in any combat theater. But it's a game changer. But what I'm trying to convey to you is there is a window of opportunity for Iran, Russia, and other countries to act. And that window of opportunity is closing very quickly. And Israel attacked a military base in Damascus. Isaiah 17 says, the burden of Damascus, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. The cities of Ar are forsaken, they shall be for flocks, which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. They shall be the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. Jeremiah chapter 49, Damascus is waxed feeble and turneth herself to flee, and fear hath seized on her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her as a woman in travail. How is the city of praise not left, the city of my joy? Therefore, her young men shall fall in her streets, and all the men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord of hosts. And I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus, and it shall consume the palaces of Ben-Hadad. Now, some say this is prophecy been fulfilled. I think it has a yet future fulfillment. And I'm just telling you that these weapons of mass destruction that they have gotten from Iraq are stored in bunkers around the city of Damascus. Israel this week attacked one of those installations. We may be on the cusp of Damascus ceasing to be a city. At the same time, there are these things going on. There's this peace process that everybody's trying to push. More Israelis push for West Bank annexations. Russia, this is from Foreign Policy. U.S. officials are eyeing new Russian capabilities in Syria. China pushes back against Trump because Trump took a phone call from the leader of Taiwan. And that's not been done for decades in the United States. And now China's upset. And Russia is using Syria and Ukraine to develop its expertise. This from the National Interest, the Middle East, worst nightmare, a war between Israel and Russia. That sounds like Ezekiel 38. The article says, Aleppo and the emerging Russian way of war, from Foreign Policy. Thousands of civilians are currently struggling to escape the smoking hulk of Aleppo as Syrian and Russian airstrikes continue to pound the rebel-held eastern half of the city. The fall of Aleppo, when it finally happens, will mark a major victory for both Syrian President Assad and his ally Vladimir Putin, whose 15-month intervention in the Syrian civil war was launched to prop up the faltering Assad regime under the guise of fighting the Islamic State. They haven't really done much with the Islamic State. The interesting thing that they've learned from this is that Russia has been very good at getting other people to fight for them. They haven't had to put a lot of Russian soldiers into these places. There's an assessment out by the American Enterprise Institute called Iran at War, Understanding Why and How Tehran Uses Military Force. You can find that on the internet. I don't have time to go into it. And here's an article by Jonathan Tobin in commentary. Can Trump stop the Iran gold rush? Iran races to clinch oil deals before Trump takes office. All what I'm trying to say is that there are all these irons in the fire, that there's a very narrow window of opportunity. I'm going to play just a short clip of Naftali Bennett, who opposes the two-state solution. And this is from the Jerusalem Post diplomatic conference a couple weeks ago. I think this is the clip that I want.
When you look at the big picture, it's not a problem. Israel is the solution. And when you understand that, the last thing you want to do is undermine this lighthouse in the center of the Middle East. You don't want to take out bricks from its foundations. You want to strengthen it. No American administration is going to be more hawkish than Israel is. So you only have one chance, and it'll happen over the next few weeks. Do we go down the good old failed path, or finally, do we try something new?
And he advocates trying something new. Now, John Kerry at the Saban Forum was very critical of Naftali Bennett. He noted that half of the ministers in the Israeli cabinet have no support for a two-state solution. And where's that going to go? I'm going to play a quick clip of Caroline Glick.
To understand what it is about strengthening America's alliance with Israel that's so essential to the United States being able to secure its goals in the Middle East, to advance America's core interests here, and generally speaking, one look no further than Russia's rise in the Middle East. Today we have leaders of almost every state in this region beating a path to Moscow to meet with President Putin. Now, the basis of Putin's rise in the region, interestingly enough, is that he has formed an alliance and has stood by the most hated leader in the Middle East, the most hated regime in the Middle East, or at least in the Arab world. Of course, that would be the Assad regime in Syria. The Assad regime in Syria is viewed by members of the Arab League as a whole as a treacherous regime that has opened up the Arab world to Shiite and Iranian hegemonic aspirations, has advanced them to the detriment of the Sunni Arabs states throughout the Middle East. There really is no one Arab leader that is hated more by most Arab leaders than Assad, and that includes, of course, Israel. And yet, rather than opposing Russia for standing by this hated regime and this hated leader, the Arab world respects Putin for doing that. The countries of the world respect Putin for having done this, and they do so because it means that he does what he says he's going to do. It means that he sticks with his allies. It means that his word is meaningful and they can trust it.
Well, you can find those online at the JPost YouTube channel. Let me just take maybe 5 minutes. I know I'm going to go over just a couple minutes. About a month ago, George Friedman at Geopolitical Futures came out with a publication called What World War III Might Look Like. Just going to briefly touch on a few areas. I have way more slides than I have time to do. But he looked at a number of areas. First, he looked at China. Is China the trigger for World War III? Then he looked at this, and one of the things he looked at was Europe's disintegration. And he was sort of wargaming what might happen, what might lead to World War III. And I only say this to show what a secular person is saying and how it lines up with Bible prophecy. Just like I did that thing with the Economist cover last week. Not that I think that they have prophecies, but they're indicating what their plans are. And what their plans are line up with what we see predicted by the ancient prophets. Europe's disintegration. During this time, Europe will be destabilizing. NATO will be weakened now that the U.S. is engaged in Asia and diverting forces there. They say that there's a dispute in Asia. The EU will have been fragmenting for a long time. Nationalist political parties will be taking power, and their goal will be to protect the interest of their own nation, not Europe as a whole. There will be small conflicts in Europe. The disintegration of the EU and the weakness of NATO will allow conflicts within and between nations to operate unchecked. Germany, the major power in Europe, will have its own economic and social problems, given its role and given its history, will not be allowed to play the role of occupier and peacemaker. The Gatestone Institute picked up on this and said ethnic Germans are leading in droves. 1.5 million people last year, highly educated, left Germany in the past decade. Why? Because of the immigration problem that they've allowed to occur. Angela Merkel's now coming out to protect herself and saying she may ban face veils. Greece continues to have a problem that migrants are causing it to really, they're disappearing, and there's thousands of them that have disappeared and they don't know where they are. Italy has changed. The government in Italy has failed. The foreign policy article the other day, the resignation of Renzi and the fall of Rome. And it talks about this growing distrust of international institutions, and you can see how all countries are resisting a global government, it seems like. Then, of course, you have the rise of Russia. Pentagon now says Russia has a drone submarine that can deliver massive military weapons. And I'll try to do an update this week, because another thing is the rise of Turkey. Erdogan's now putting in, he's at war, he's at loggerheads with the EU. He's putting in place changes to the Constitution that will allow him to remain in office till 2029, if the world's going to survive that long at this point. and he's becoming an autocrat. In fact, there's a big article yesterday in the Wall Street Journal in their review section, Turkey's autocratic turn, talking about what's happened in Turkey. And all of this, I think, plays perfectly into the Bible prophecy scenario. So get ready. Things could happen very quickly. They may not. But I'm just saying is even with the election of Trump, the volatility of the world has not changed. The moral decay of the United States has not changed. And we need to be prepared. So let's pray, and we'll pick this up again the next time I can do an update. Father, we just thank you again for your word and your instruction to us, the grace that you showed us, and giving us the prophets and what they wrote thousands of years ago so that we might understand the times that we live in and prepare for the coming of the Lord. I pray that you'll bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.